Hello, economic students. We're going to continue our discussion of types of business organizations today. Yesterday, we started with sole proprietorships, the very simplest form of business organization, really, that there is. Today, we're going to move up in complexity just a little bit, and we'll be talking about partnerships and franchises. Let's start with partnerships, though. A partnership is simply a business organization that's owned by two or more people who share control. Now, it could be as many as 1,000 people, even more than 1,000 people could have partnership and ownership in the business. But most partnerships are relatively small still. But anytime you have at least two people owning the business and controlling the way the business operates, you have a partnership. There are some advantages to having a partnership, and let's take a look at some of those. First of all, the organization structure itself is an advantage of partnerships. You do need to have a legal agreement among all the partners that define the responsibilities very clearly and how compensation will take place. By compensation, I mean, how much money each partner is going to make from the profits of the partnership. Not all partners, for example, may have an equal compensation to each other. Some will be compensated perhaps more than others, depending on the agreement that is made between the partners. It is still a very simple organizational structure. The partners control things, but it's a little bit more complex than a sole proprietorship because you do have multiple people involved in running the business, and those responsibilities and inputs into the business must be clearly defined, and generally will have some kind of a legal contract involved. There's a better potential growth in a partnership than there is in a proprietorship because you have multiple people coming into the business with their financial resources. You will have typically more money brought into the business, which will give the business a more solid financial footprint, a more solid financial standing from the very start. And similarly, talent. The partnership can take advantage of the various strengths of the partners. I have a couple of friends who started a partnership some years ago. One of the guys, there were two guys, and one of them was very much an outgoing salesman type guy. He's the kind of guy that, when he meets someone, he's immediately their friend. He can establish a very quick rapport with a total stranger. That's an important strength to have for someone in business who has to sell stuff. You want to be able to really make that interpersonal connection, and this guy could. The other partner was not as good at that sort of thing. He was more of a quiet type guy, and he was the kind of guy that liked to stay in the office and take care of stuff in the office. He did the books and he ran the machines, that sort of thing. That was what he liked to do. The other guy had no desire to be stuck in an office. He wanted to be out meeting potential clients. So each was taking advantage of the unique talents of the other individual in that partnership. Let's look at some disadvantages, though. Like sole proprietorships, there are also some disadvantages of running your business as a partnership. First of all, partnerships, like a proprietorship, have a limited life. They will not go on forever. Eventually, the partners want to retire. There's still limited funds. Even though all the partners are bringing their financial resources into the business, there is still a limit in the amount of financial resources available to the partnership, and that limit is strictly the amount of financial resources that the various partners have themselves. They cannot raise money externally from the business very easily. The organization structure, although I mentioned it is an advantage, it's a relatively simple organization structure with clearly defined roles. Still, it can cause problems. Sometimes partners don't get along. And in fact, the business that I mentioned to you earlier with the two friends of mine who were partners and working off each other's strength, ultimately those guys parted ways because they had different views on how the company's direction should go. And ultimately, one of the partners had to buy the other partner out. The partnership ceased being a partnership and became a sole proprietorship because they did not get along. And sadly, they became no longer friends as well. And finally, and again, a big one, there is unlimited liability in a partnership. That means that if something goes wrong with the business and they are sued, then all the partners could potentially lose everything they own. There was a huge partnership called Arthur Andersen and Company back, well, for over 100 years, this company existed as a very, very large partnership. One office of that partnership got involved in some illegal activity, and a lot of stockholders for one of their clients were hurt as a result of what Arthur Andersen's employees and partners were doing at just one office. This is a huge partnership with offices all over the United States and some offices overseas as well. But because of the illegal activities of just one office of Arthur Andersen, that company was sued by people that Arthur Andersen had defrauded. And as a result, Arthur Andersen doesn't exist anymore. The partners of Arthur Andersen lost cumulatively millions and millions of dollars. And ultimately, that partnership ceased to exist as a result. So unlimited liability and limited life both came into play here. And it was a serious issue. And so keep that in mind. A huge disadvantage of both partnerships and proprietorships is this unlimited liability. Now there are some partnerships will organize as a limited partnership, and this is important to note. A limited partnership will limit the liability to just one or a few of the partners, and other partners will only contribute the financial resources into the business. They will not be held to that unlimited liability, however. So when you see a company and the name of the company after, they'll say like John Doe Incorporated, or you might see it as John Doe LLC. That means limited liability company. And in this case, what happens is the partners who agree to the unlimited liability will typically get larger compensation to those partners who strictly contribute financial resources, but they do not carry that unlimited liability. Their liability is limited, and they will not be compensated as much as those partners that have the unlimited liability. So this though is a way that some partnerships will get around that huge disadvantage of all of the partners being held to unlimited liability. Some statistics on partnerships. Again, you don't need to write these down, but it's kind of interesting, gives you a sense of where partnerships stand in the total economy of the United States. They represent about 8% of all businesses. Remember, proprietorships were 70% of all businesses. And they represent 12% of business income. Remember, proprietorships were 5% of the business income in America. So there's far fewer partnerships, but they have more than double the business income of the proprietorships. A lot of these partnerships are accounting firms and law firms, and some of them are very, very big. And the largest partnership is Jones Day Company out of Cleveland, a law firm with over 2,400 partners and about $1.5 billion in revenue. That's a pretty big company. And those partners are making pretty good money sharing that kind of revenue. Okay, let's talk real quickly about franchises, another type of business organization. A franchise is a license that allows a business to operate as if it were part of a larger corporation. You may not realize that this business that you're looking at is a franchise. It appears perhaps to be part of a big company. A lot of these franchise operations will be fast food companies and beverage bottling and distribution companies. So think about a company like Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's or the Subways, those types of businesses. Those are oftentimes franchise operations. A lot of these franchise companies like McDonald's and others will have some of their restaurants that are corporate owned, but others are franchise, where the franchisee buys the license that allows them to operate as if they were a part of McDonald's. So the beverage bottling and distribution, these are, again, you would drive by one of these businesses and you might think that, there's a facility of Dr. Pepper. But actually what is happening here is Dr. Pepper is a company that uses this franchise operation to bottle their product. Dr. Pepper, by the way, simply makes a syrup, okay? They make the syrup. And then the bottling company, which is typically a franchise, will take the syrup from Dr. Pepper, mix it with carbonated water and whatnot, and get it bottled and then sell it to the retail establishments like a grocery store. So beverage bottling and distribution companies are typically franchises. There's one in Rockford over on Forest Hills Road, which you may have noticed before, not far from the intersection of Forest Hills and Pepper. Some advantages of franchising. The franchise corporation receives income from selling the retail outlets to others. This is advantage from the standpoint of the corporation, like McDonald's Incorporated. They sell McDonald's restaurants to the franchisee, and by selling that retail outlet, that restaurant, McDonald's Corporation makes a lot of money. It enables McDonald's to expand with very little cost to itself, because the person buying the franchise is the one that's putting up all the upfront costs for that expansion. From the standpoint of the person buying the franchise buyer benefits from the expertise of the larger corporation. The franchise buyer may have no idea how to run a restaurant, but McDonald's will teach that franchise buyer how to run a restaurant. In fact, there's a place in Oak Brook, Illinois called Hamburger University, where McDonald's will take its franchise owners and teach them the ins and outs of running a hamburger joint. The franchise buyer also benefits from the national advertising and name recognition. So if I'm buying a McDonald's franchise, McDonald's advertises itself to the world. I, as the franchise buyer, benefit from the advertising that McDonald's puts forth. I don't have to pay for that advertising out of my own budget. The corporation does it. And I get all that name recognition automatically since I bought into the McDonald's. Now, just as there is advantages to owning a franchise, there's also some disadvantages, and these can be significant. The large corporation will maintain control over many parts of the operation of the franchise. So if I'm a franchise owner, this is a disadvantage to me as the franchise owner. I don't have a lot of independence on how I run my business. If I'm running a franchise for McDonald's, McDonald's Corporation kind of tells me how to run the business. They can even tell me where my business will be. I knew someone who ran a franchise of Baskin-Robbins ice cream stores. Baskin-Robbins told her she had to move her restaurant or her ice cream store to another location on the other side of town. She didn't want to do it. She ultimately closed down her franchise, sold it, and got out of the business because McDonald's was Baskin-Robbins was putting too much control over the way she operated, even telling her where to locate. The franchise owner must purchase wholesale products from specific suppliers. McDonald's tells the McDonald's franchisee where to get his buns, where to get his meat, where to get his furniture. Everything is pretty much dictated to the franchise buyer. So if someone were to come and say, hey, I'd like to sell you some hamburger buns here that are better than what you're using today, sorry, I got to use what I'm told to use. You don't have that freedom. The franchise purchase price could be very, very expensive. We're talking $100,000 or more upfront to buy a franchise. So yeah, franchise purchase price is expensive. And for McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken or something like that, it could be well into hundreds of thousands of dollars. And from the standpoint of the corporation could be hurt by mistakes made by the franchise owner. Some years ago, there was a franchise operation that sold some coffee that had been calibrated to too hot of a temperature. Someone was severely burned, and McDonald's got bad publicity as a result of the franchise owner's mistake. The franchise was sued. McDonald's was sued. Big bucks were involved. So that's it for franchises. Check Canvas, see if you have any assignment, and you guys have a great day.